Hello, everyone. This is Liz, live from the Derry Public Library's New Hampshire room. I hope you're all doing well on this Monday. And Monday means Director Day. And I am finally going to talk about, I don't know if I call him the best director, but he's definitely my favorite person director ever. John Waters, whom, fun fact, I share a birthday with. I always say I share a birthday with two men that I admire. The first is my uncle, who's also my godfather, and the second is John Waters. And believe it or not, actually, if you've been to the Derry Public Library, you can believe it. Both of them have shaped me into the person I am today. Um, so we're gonna get into this first. So where do we start with John Waters? Also, I need to be sure I keep this to under, I don't know, an hour, because I could talk about him all day. So John Waters, born April 22nd, 1946. Um, Born in Baltimore. If you know anything about him, Baltimore is really big for him. Most of his movies take place there or around that area. Um, but he grew up in Lutherville, which is a little bit outside Baltimore. Born to a working class family, Roman Catholic family. And when he grew up in Lutherville, he met Glenn Milsteed, aka Divine. Like, everyone knows who Divine is. And what's this? Is this an autograph from John Waters on my female trouble criterion? Yes, it is. So John grew up loving films. His mother actually said that the Leslie Caron film Lily had a huge effect on him, and John says Wizard of Oz also had an effect. And just the whole beatnik culture at the time from the 50s. He went to Catholic schools throughout his childhood. I think went to college, and in his words, got kicked out of college. But hung out with the beatniks section of Baltimore, the punks, the miscreants, and kind of that's where he found his people. If you know anything about the 1950s, there was definitely a big conformist streak in there. And this idea of if you didn't fit into this, or at least in the suburbs, fit into this model of, the perfect American Leave It to Beaver family, you kind of felt out of place. Obviously, we also know about reading from the 50s. Even behind the Leave It to Beaver facade, it wasn't perfection, but if you think it's hard being different now, imagine how it was back then. So he found his way to people who were gay, people who liked to cross dress, people who were trans. And with those people, he started making short films like Hag in a Black Leather Jacket and Eat Your Makeup. And he had a cast of players called the Dreamlanders, and they've been used in some way, shape, or form in every single one of his films. Mink Stoll, Cookie Mueller, Edith Massey, David Lochary, Mary Vivian Pierce, Susan Walsh, list goes on. And these weren't like classically trained actors. These are people who liked performing, but they weren't people who went to like, Juilliard. But again, these were all people who liked to have fun, walk on the wild side, be a little weird. I think, as John Waters said at one point when they were filming Crybaby and Tracy Lords was being talked to by the FBI. Long story short, why was Tracy Lords being talked to by the FBI? She was in a certain type of film before she was legal. I'll leave it at that. But she was crying like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna get arrested." And John says, "Oh come on, we've all been arrested." And a whole bunch of people who were in it, cast and crew, just raised their hands, like, yeah. So definitely a cast of freaks and weirdos, but also a cast where a lot of people kind of felt that they could just be themselves. So his first film is in 1969, his first feature length, and it's called Mondo Trasho. It will likely never be re-released because it uses a lot of popular music in it, and licensing rights would be a nightmare. However, fun fact, if you go looking on archive.org, it's there if you want to see it. I have it's I'm going to say this, and John Waters pretty much agrees with me. It would have worked better as a short film, but he was very inspired by like the Andy Warhol type of stuff at the time. So it is interesting because you do start to see the little seeds of where John is going to go from there. His first hit, not hit, but I guess I should say full length feature film that can be re released on DVD is Multiple Maniacs. And that stars Divine, Mary Vivian Pierce, David Lochary, Mink Stoll, and that got John noticed and definitely became kind of a cult film around Baltimore. This is the one where Divine makes love to a lobster. Yes, you heard that right. But the little bit of fame they got from Multiple Maniacs was nothing compared to what came in 1972 with Pink Flamingos. And that is something where I think Roger Ebert said, I can't even really judge this as a film. And honestly, it isn't so much of a film as it is a provocation. And it's a star vehicle for Divine, who was John's star in all of his movies. And you do, I mean, I can't in good conscience really recommend this. I would say read the Wikipedia page and see if you're down for this trip. But it is a star vehicle for Divine, and Divine is an actor who had star power. They had presence, and they're genuinely a good actor. Um, What's the plot of Pink Flamingos? It's basically Divine is the filthiest person alive who lives with her son and his girlfriend, and they are in a rivalry with two well dressed perverts, played by David Lochary and Mick Stoll. And again, a whole lot of weird stuff happens. He follows it up with Female Trouble, which I would actually say is a very prescient film about how far people will go for fame and how the public will kind of love a sideshow attraction fame person. It's I think out of all of his films, probably the most political, and again, one where you kind of feel like he predicted a part of the future. And again, another great role of for Divine is John Davenport. In 1977, he has Desperate Living, which is about a bunch of miscreants who live in this sort of a cordoned off trash village with Edith Massey as the queen. This is probably, I would say, one of his three or four like 70s movies. My least favorite, if only because I thought it was going to be a different movie. However, I will say this: Mink Stoll's opening shriek monologue is one of the funniest things ever put to film. So in 1980s, New Line gets behind him and he has a break into the mainstream with Polyester. So in 1981, this comes out. It stars once again stars Divine and stars former Teen Idol Tab Hunter. And this is a much more refined version of John Waters, but it's still quintessentially John Waters. It's a takeoff of the Douglas Sirk films from the 1950s. You have Divine playing Francine Fishpaw, a poor, beset upon wife whose, husband and kids are terrible to her. And it's also a satirization of these movies that were coming out in the late 70s of, oh no, social mores are changing, what do we do? And it's my personal favorite of his films, that and Female Trouble. But I do tell people, if you want a taste of what John Waters is like, this is a good entryway. And then you can go, do you want to go earlier or keep going later? So in between this, around this time, a couple of the Dreamland cast passed away in 1977. David Lochary died from addiction. And after Polyester, Edith Massey passed away. And they were both people that he had used for all of his films. He actually didn't use David for Desperate Living because, for as much as Waters tolerated, drugs were not one of them. And when he went forward to make Hairspray in 1988, which is probably his biggest hit, after the release of that, Divine passes away, which is his big performer, and even beyond a big performer, his friend. So John does soldier on despite losing key members of the cast. He also lost one of his other collaborators, Cookie Mueller, not soon after Divine in 1989. So he makes Serial Mom in 1994, which is a great film starring Kathleen Turner. Also, fun cameo from Patty Hearst. He makes Crybaby in 1990, with a young Johnny Depp. And in 1998, he makes Pecker, starring Edward Furlong, Christina Ricci, which I think is a very underrated film of his. And that actually was the first movie of his that I saw. In 2000, he makes Cecil B. Demented with Melanie Griffin, and in 2004, he releases his last film, A Dirty Shame, with Tracey Ullman, which is kind of a shame because A Dirty Shame is not that great of a movie, but it got harder and harder for him to get funding, and he actually hasn't made a movie since. But he has still remained active. I mean, he has been acting for years. He actually acted, from the 80s on. He was in a fantastic episode of The Simpsons called Homer's Phobia, which I have rewatched and I think holds it very well. It is a little bit 90s and just how shocked people are about a person being gay, and at 2020, that's not a huge deal. But it's still, I think, a very funny and witty episode, and John gives a great voiceover performance. He's also a very prolific writer. great. So he's been writing books since the 90s as well, crackpot, shock value. But he actually became a lot more prolific once he stopped making movies. So there's a great book of his called Role Models, and he great essay in there. He talks about his friendship with Manson girl Leslie Van Houten. And he makes no excuses for what she or the other members of the Manson family did when he was actually Female Trouble is dedicated to Tex Watson, and that's something he's kind of walked back. He's just like, I was a dumb kid at the time, and as I've grown older, I realize how insensitive that was. But he talks about his friendship with Leslie Van Houten and how she is a person who actually has reformed herself and understands what she did. And I would recommend everyone go look for that essay. He also wrote a great book called Car Sick, in which he hitchhikes across America. And yes, he actually did that. And it's this. Yeah, autographed to me. It is a great book if you want a funny read to kind of take you away from everything right now. And a book that came out last year, also autographed to me, is Mr. Know-It-All, Wisdom from a Filth Elder, and he goes around the country doing spoken word tours. He's also a huge bibliophile. He loves to talk about how much he reads, and he has that very famous quote of, if you're go home with someone and they don't have books, leave. That's a censored version of it. But yeah, he is an all-around fun guy. And why is he important? So I would call what he does punk guerrilla filmmaking. Definitely, fly by the seat of your pants, didn't get permits. And also a good indie filmmaker. If you want someone who made it a splash in indie filmmaking, John Waters is that. He also pushed boundaries for what you can put on films, as all exploitation filmmakers do, but he did it more not to shock. Well, it was to shock, but it was also for fun. As he puts it, he goes, I love making fun of things that I love and, pushing the boundaries. And the reason I think John, he does stuff that you would definitely consider politically correct. And it was back then, it still is now. But I think the reason John endures and why he has such a following is he doesn't punch down. He punches up, and he doesn't, like, he's friends with people who are on the margin. So for him, they are never the butt of the jokes. If anything, the establishment is always the butt of the joke. I think there's a great moment in Pink Flamingos where David Lochry's character is going around flashing women. And he flashes this one woman who is played by a woman named Elizabeth Coffey, who is a transgender woman and at the time of filming had not had bottom surgery yet. So what she does is she returns the favor and flashes David Lochry. And that is a great joke because Elizabeth Coffey is not the butt of the joke. The butt of the joke isn't, oh my god, it's a transgender woman. The joke is David Lochry can't take what he dishes out. And that is why John endures to so many people. That is why he brings hundreds of people to Camp John Waters every year. That's why thousands of people go to see him speak, is because he sticks up for the freaks and the weirdos. He doesn't make fun of them. And one of the things when I finally got to meet him at Camp John Waters, I said, I kind of wish I'd found out about you when I was a little younger, because then I could have stopped focusing on all the bullies in my school. And he just said, yeah, but you eventually realized they didn't mean expletive, right? And I did. But I think that's what he represents to a lot of people. It's marching by the beat of your own drum, being yourself, and being as weird as you want to be. He may not be the best technical filmmaker I've ever talked about, but in terms of people, he's one of the favorite people I've ever spoken about. So where to start with John Waters? I would say, just to be let's safe for work, I would say start with Polyester and Hairspray. And then I would say look at the Wikipedia summaries for some of his earlier work and see if you want to seek them out. His 70s stuff is not for everybody, and I fully accept that. But I would definitely say look up his writing. He's had a lot of great interviews, a lot of great essays, and he's just an American treasure, in my opinion. So I hope you'll look into him a little more. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow with What's on Netflix.